As we've reached the halfway point this week, the Missouri legislative session, there's still quite a few things for us to get done between now and May 17th when the session ends. One of the major things that has continued to make it through the legislature is Senate Joint Resolution 74 that I've spoke about various times. And that is the bill that we're passing that will go to the voters to change the system or what is required to be able to pass any form of resolution that would end up in the Missouri Constitution, any form of law. Currently, simple majority plus one would put things in the Constitution. This would require a majority plus five of the 8 congressional districts also pass that resolution. So it's something, as all of you know, that I've supported continuously. I see this as a benefit. The 12th Senatorial District, representing Great Northwest, 18 and a half counties. At this point in time, as we see the population migrate more and more to our major urban areas, St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, those areas, if they vote to pass something, those of us that live in a more rural part of the state are lost out, I believe, in being able to share our voice on these kind of issues being put in our Constitution. So therefore, that's the major reason why I'm supporting SJR 74, so that people have to work in all the state of Missouri to get something passed, not in just 3 areas in the state. Another bill that went through Senate this week, and we third read it today on Thursday, is Senate Bill 727. This bill is going to be called this year, without a doubt, the Omnibus Education Bill. And there's a lot of different pieces of legislation in that. I think I heard somebody say that the number of pages ended up on the plus side of 150. And yes, folks, I've looked at all of it. I went through spreadsheets. I've looked at Fiscal note, etc. But knowing exactly how many pages it's in at the end, I don't know. It ended up 150 plus. And with that, I was able to be part of the discussion or part of the work that went on to be able to get things passed. And I think all of us can find things in there we enjoy, and probably all of us can find things in there that we do not enjoy. But start of the bill dealt with Missouri Empowerment Scholarship Account Program. I think another important part, as we discuss the ESA or Missouri Empowerment Scholarship Account Program, as the amount of those tax credits continue to rise. The last number I heard, there was 20-some million that were used in the last year. I don't know where those are at today, but as that number rises, continue to rise, 20 million, 50 million, up to that $75 million cap. As the growth occurs, it continues to be associated with our transportation formula, and that for my district is very important. We have to continue to do a good job of feeding money or keeping that transportation formula funded if those tax credits will be allowed to rise and increase. So I think that's another important part that we need to discuss as we discuss these scholarship accounts. Also, another piece of this bill would allow a charter school expansion in Boone County, in that one county in our state. And there's various triggers or levers that I even played a role in that I think that that's important. And if we're going to do that expansion in that area, I believe their funding process needs to be the old funding process and when charter schools began, instead of some of the changes that affected St. Louis and Kansas City. Also, another thing with that, changing the date that schools would start was a big conversation. That is no longer part of the bill, so our school start dates are still required to be no earlier than 14 days before the first Monday in September. And as somebody that worked on that when I was in the House, I think that's important to keep it there. I do think it's good for families. I think it's good for students. And I also think it's good for schools on the whole that we give that a little bit extra free time there in August before school starts. Increasing the minimum teacher salary was another portion of that. Statutorily, our salary will move to $40,000 and $48,000 in the coming years. And with that, there's also a statutory account being set up that will help fund or help supplement several schools if they need that as they move toward trying to make that $40,000 their base. One final thing that I want to discuss as we talk about this large education bill or the omnibus bill that also it will impact my district especially is currently there's something called small schools grant that affects many schools in my district, and that dollar amount is statutorily capped at $15 million. Of course, that bill was passed or the formula was done sometime in the early 2000s, and as we've seen inflation, et cetera, go on, there's no opportunity to increase that dollar amount amount. So one of the things that I push for fairly hard, I'm happy that the people working on the bill agreed to help me with this, is to increase that from 15 million to 30 million. It doesn't automatically mean there'll be 30 million. Of course, this has to become law before we can do it, but it allows the legislature an option to increase the money put towards a small school grant from 15 up to 30. So hopefully in the future we'll be able to increase that, and I know that'll have a positive impact for many schools in the 12th senatorial district. At this point, the Missouri Senate's passed 11 bills and joint resolutions total. That's not a high number. I guess some of us think sometimes it's good when we don't pass a lot of stuff, and certainly we didn't do that the first half of this legislative session. But of those 11 bills, we've talked about education already. We passed things with education, elections, dealing with tax policy, and public safety. And I do believe after we come back in session, we will do more than work on our budget, which the House, I think, will bring the budget bills formally to the Senate no later than the first part of April. And then the Senate will diligently be able to do what we think might be advantageous for citizens in the state, as well as we have something that you're going to be hearing about later, the FRA tax. I may have mentioned that once before, but I'll hopefully explain that more to you later. We've got those two major pieces of legislation to get done. But I do believe, folks, we're going to get a few more things passed that's going to be good for us in Northwest Missouri, as well as the rest of the people of the state.